forth between the characters.
No, we lost our recording. Just a second.
Jumped offline.
Recording or stream?
We lost the stream.
Rewind.
Well, it was recording and then it just stopped. So
say that again.
now
It's the same different thing.
All right. Anyway, if you feel like the book is too confusing, we can pick another book. That's no
well,
problem.
it jumps back and forth between the emotion that the individuals are displaying to the actual reality.
What's going on
of the
behind
conflict
the scenes.
behind the scenes.
Yeah, the only problem is that
So
they don't distinguish those two very clearly for me.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, wait, why are we talking about this now?
Yeah, I've always thought Peretti was kind of wordy myself, just...
I don't mind the wordy, it's just like, it's just so randomly like, here, now we're here, now we're here.
If you think of it almost as a screenplay, like
yeah, that's how I'm
TV
thinking
show,
about it.
You switch back and forth between scenes and you see something happening here and then it fades to this other one and it's someplace else. That's kind of the way it's written.
I mean, I'm fine with sticking with the story.
We want the folks out there to gain something from it, and if we're having difficulty, and we're actually familiar with somewhat familiar with the book, then I'm just wondering, we need to hear from you folks out there if it's something that is advantageous or not, because we want to do something that's
could just
beneficial.
Be me not understanding.
Well, no, it's
I think your dad's having problems with it too.
Yeah, so.
He's voiced his concerns privately.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably different if you're not literally the one reading it.
Yeah.
Because then that allows you to look at it visually and connect it up.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to picture the visuals, it does tend to jump scene to scene where it's like,
wait, why are we here now?
The Prince of Devils is casting the guy against the wall. Now Sunity is over here getting her hair stroked by like, like, what's going on? There's a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I don't know whether we're in the future or in the past right now.
In that sense, I mean, it's kind of
or in their
one
mind,
of the things
or not in their mind.
that the Bible advocates. There's a great controversy going on all around us all the time, and there are so many different facets of that controversy that are playing out.
Yeah,
it's not like the devil's just dealing with a little group over here or an individual over there. It's just like everywhere. What's going on?
If we had the curtain lifted, we could see what was happening.
Yeah, the chaos would be overwhelming. I mean, and some of it seems more subtle than, and some of it seems more direct. But nonetheless, the end game is the enemy is trying to confound people out there so that they miss out on the blessing of heaven and the blessing of knowing the truth.
Yeah. But I mean, it does pose interesting questions for discussion though sometimes. Like this is kind of bringing up the New Age people. This one particular chapter this is obviously a New Ager.
I like where it's going.
Right. Anyway,
I just find it hard to keep up.
I think part of it is that we're a week. We're doing this a week. If I was reading,
I don't think it's that either. I think it's just that it's like it's just pretty scattered in general. Because even when we were reading it consistently, I was having a hard time keeping up with it.
Right.
Because its pace is just kind of fast for what it's talking
about. If it really was a movie, you'd probably be able to follow it just fine.
Probably, yeah.
It's that you're not thinking in that direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm picturing all this stuff, but
okay.
It's whatever. That doesn't matter to me. Maybe it's just me.
All right, so we're moving into our last commandment here, number 10.
He's actually number 9.
I have number 9. Oh, he's number 9.
Number 9 is doing 10.
Number 9 is doing 10.
Started number 2 kind of study.
Number 2 kind of study. Got a number, whatever pencil this is. Number 2 pencil. Sweet. So we'll just jump right into it. We'll go to Exodus 20:17. If somebody can read that out.
It says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's." That's 17.
Yeah, and the definition for covet specifically, if you want to look at them on, you can, but I also got it written down, is kamed, which is to delight in beauty, or greatly, beloved, covet, delightable, whatever. It's got a bunch of definitions to it. Desire, goodly, lust, be pleasant, or to be a precious thing, or to be a pleasant thing. So basically, it's like wanting something that's like
that's
nice,
not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, wanting something that's not yours.
Wanting something that's not yours.
Yeah.
It's a different type of desire. Although apparently there is a positive way of viewing it, so I guess it's all in context.
Yeah, that's what I noticed, is that it's is that you can covet something goodly.
Maybe it just means to desire.
Yeah, it does. Pretty well. I mean, that's one of the definitions, is desire. Because it's got delight, desire, delectable, beloved, greatly.
It's not a word we use very often in English anymore.
No, because we really use it only in a negative context, but Hebrews could have used it in a positive. It could have just been for them, I want. Because, you could say, I want good things for you, or you could say, like, I want your stuff. I covet good things for you.
It's interesting that this text starts off with, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. When you in the order of things in life, when you're talking about desiring what belongs to someone else.
Housewife, servants, and things.
Yeah. Housewife, servants, livestock.
Right.
Nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Why did he have to get so specific about all these things? Why couldn't he have just said, you shouldn't desire what belongs to someone else for your own,
Don't covet your neighbor's things.
But is there anything wrong with seeing what someone else has and wanting to have something like that? Not necessarily. So I get the feeling this is wanting what he has, not wanting something similar. Like, you see someone that's got, a new lawnmower that's really cutting the grass and yours is kind of rickety. There's nothing wrong with thinking, well, that's a good brand.
It's the difference between I want that and I want to have my own.
I want to come take yours.
Yeah. It's really just a place, because this is like really the heart commandment. This is really what tells you where your heart is set. We'll go ahead and read. Let's see. We'll kind of look at some of the stuff that happens from coveting, where that really takes us. We'll go to Samuel 11. I'll read 1 through 5.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned this probably in the past.
Samuel.
This is the only commandment that deals at the level of the mind, more or less.
That's why I said this is the heart commandment.
Yeah.
Because
but realistically, this is the one that indicates that all of the commandments have to do with the heart.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So is this kind of summing up?
Yeah, so what happens for covet, or what happens when we covet? These are some of the examples I could pretty easily find. 2 Samuel 11, 1 through 5, sorry.
Although honoring your parents, right? The one that we looked at, what's that, number 5? Honor your father and your mother. That's kind of a mind or heart type of thing as well. What do you think?
Added emphasis.
Go ahead and read Samuel 11, 1 through 5.
Samuel 11, 1 through 5.
2 Samuel, yeah.
2 Samuel?
Mm-hmm.
And it came to pass, after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon, and besieged Rabbah. But David tarried still at Jerusalem. And it came to pass in an evening tide that David arose from off his bed, and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness. And she returned unto her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David, and said, I am with child. And then, is it 5?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Just, because, we know the story for that. I was just using that as the reference. And then somebody can jump.
I went back and looked at the Strong's with the word kamad that is translated as covet. And it's interesting, the other places in Genesis that it's used. it was used for the word pleasant to the sight. When God made the trees that were growing in the garden pleasant to the sight. It's also used
So you would covet trees.
When Eve saw the tree was good for food, it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. That's that same word, kamad.
Right, coveting.
Yeah. And so then you go into Exodus a little further beyond the Ten Commandments, and God says, I will cast the nations out before thee and enlarge thy borders. Neither shall any man desire, covet thy land.
Yeah.
Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife. The graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not desire the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it unto thee. So in every case, coveting, or desiring in this case, appears to be a negative thing.
Cool, that's actually where I was taking this. Go ahead and read further along in 11 really quick, just so we can see what happens as a result for David coveting.
Then David sent to
That's
Joab.
not on. Go to 15. Read 15 and 17 in 11.
Oh.
Just so you don't have to read like all of it.
Okay, so he wrote in the letter saying, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die. So it was, while Joab besieged the city, that he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew there would be violent men. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. How far do you want to go?
That's it. Because I was emphasizing the point that because of David coveting, not only did his coveting lead to adultery, but it also led to him becoming a murderer. So coveting was just this slope for him to go down, and literally just drove him into being just worse and worse because of coveting.
Right. One bad choice leads to others.
Yeah, and especially because it makes big leaps often.
And that's what I think is being emphasized with coveting there. You know, there may be all kinds of things that catch your eye, that initially you have a desire to say, yeah, I'd like something like that. You know, that'd be sweet. But yet, God basically says you need to make a choice to stand down, to reject that, and make. In other words, it's leading you to a choice.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
well, in Proverbs it says, if your right eye offend thee, pluck it out. Save your hands.
Maybe if you don't, maybe again because you're not making the right choice.
Yeah.
I think too that the word covet is actually the word desire, and there are other places that the same word is used in a positive sense. More to be desired are they than gold, referring to the law and God's commandments.
Sure.
So the desire is not the problem. Seeing something and liking it, and wanting to have that kind of thing is not evil in itself.
No.
It has to do with an inordinate desire, or a desire for something that doesn't belong to you.
I think that's why English, and maybe even Hebrew, I'm not sure if Hebrew has a separate thing for it too. I think that's why we have the divide between covet and desire.
It's like what happened here. David saw something. He saw a woman bathing, right?
He said she was very beautiful.
And very beautiful to behold. And then instead of just saying
turning
away and saying, okay, that happened. He sent and inquired about the woman, and he started to follow through with it. Follow through with his desire.
Had he checked his desire at the moment of the impulse, and said, no, this is sinful.
So we're basically talking about temptation and following through with it.
Well, by the same token, you have the story of Joseph with Potiphar's wife.
Right.
He was alone with her, and she said, my husband's away. Here we have a chance to get together. And he checked that desire immediately, no matter what she looked like or what power she had.
Right.
He said, no, I can't do this evil.
And so for her to save face, she
accused him of attempting to attack her.
Right.
Yeah, coveting, the way I look at coveting, it's a really, really awesome commandment, because it's coveting is the pre-sin sin. Coveting is like your pre-sin. If you can keep the 10 Commandments, or if you can keep the 10th Commandment, then you can keep all the other commandments, because that's just how it falls. That's where it determines your heart. This is why I call it the heart commandment.
Ingrid says, I think coveting in this sense is more of an uncontrollable lust. It's more than admiration.
And look who had the integrity. It was actually Uriah who had the integrity in the whole thing, because remember David sent
Let him come home.
let him come home, and he's going to try to basically cover up this bad thing that's happened now. And David tells Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet, and so he departed from the king's house.
Yeah.
And a gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, did not go down to his house. So when David told him, when David found out that he didn't go down, then he had to take it a step further. You know, I couldn't get Uriah to go down and actually be with his wife and do the thing that naturally comes from a man that's been away, at war. But now he's got to take it a step further. But here Uriah is the one that said, hey, all the men, don't have this kind of opportunity. I'm not going to take it either, even though it's being offered. So.
Well, I could almost see where he may have thought that even maybe the king was testing him as a soldier, and he was like, yeah,
right.
No, like, these are the rules. We don't do this during
Well,
wartime.
he later on talked about how, like, he was really upset with David sleeping with his wife, though. So he slept at the same spot, but he's like, why would I go back down to my house when my king has slept with my wife?
No, he didn't say that. No,
he didn't know.
He didn't know anything about it.
Yeah,
but he started talking about it, though. Why?
No, what he was selling him was that.
Or is that like him saying if my?
No, he was just saying those are the rules, that like I shouldn't go and be with my wife because everyone else hasn't been with theirs either.
Right.
Like that was the rule during battle.
He didn't want to have any unusual privileges.
He was loyal to the king. He was a loyal soldier, and his fellow soldiers weren't getting to spend time with their wives. He wasn't going to do that.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like Uriah knew nothing about it.
Oh.
He was definitely the innocent victim. I mean, and then of course and then to think the whole army betrayed him. David took it a step further. Not only that David wanted to get rid of him, but the whole army.
Because David did say,
the captain,
take him to war
the
so that
captain,
he may
the rest
die.
of the army betrayed him.
The other army didn't betray him so much. They didn't know what was happening. Only
they were told
to fall back.
To fall back, to step down.
Which meant that David's private sin suddenly became an extremely public one.
Yeah.
Because
they hung him out to dry.
Yeah.
They just sent him to the slaughter. They knew he was going to be overwhelmed, and they were willing to step back and let it happen on the king's order.
Right.
To me, if you were another soldier, what's that going to say to another soldier there?
Well, it does say that it doesn't say that it was just Uriah out there. It does say that some of them were killed too. So I mean.
Yeah.
But Joel knew.
Yeah, he did.
Captain knew.
Mm-hmm.
The Reedies say it's unfortunate that with one wrong step, it doesn't usually stop there. It's a slippery slope that people seem to descend to once they make the first choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
that's what happened with the rich young ruler when he came to Jesus.
That's the next thing I have marked in here.
Jesus told him, to keep my commandments. And he said, I've kept them all since my youth. And Jesus said, go sell everything you have and give it to the poor and follow me. And
so he was striking at that
covetousness, his desire for
that's the next reference I wrote down here for Mark 10. Let's go to Exodus 32. Read 1 to 10, or read 1 to 5, and then someone else can read 5 to 10. Split it up if you want. Exodus 32. But like us, what I was going off earlier is that if you can keep the 10th commandment, you can keep all the others. This is why when Jesus said, when Jesus is talking about the great commandment, saying, love your God, love your Lord thy God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul. And then he went off onto the second one, which is love your neighbor as yourself, and all the law and the prophets. This is why he was talking about that. It's why he was summarizing the coveting inside that, basically. Like, if you can keep the 10th, you can keep every other commandment, because if you do not covet other gods, you will not sin against God. If you do not covet other people's wife, you will not sin against man.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's why I was really emphasizing the point that this is really the heart commandment that shows you where people's heart is.
So we're reading 32, what now?
Exodus 32, 1 to 10. Or you can split it up and do 5 verses and someone else can do 5.
Yeah, well, I'll start out. It says, "Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, 'Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.' And Aaron said to them, 'Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me.'" Pretty telling there. So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, "This is your God, small g, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So, I guess somebody's going to pick it up from 5.
Sure. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I have commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, my wrath may let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them." That my wax may wax hot.
A lot of W's and R's.
Yeah. That I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation.
Well, that would have been awful tempting for Moses, who
Would have been so much easier.
Knew firsthand the resistance,
how stubborn people,
the resistance that he was getting from some of these folks. So, but Moses pleaded with the Lord.
Yeah.
You know,
probably the only reason Israel is still a nation today is because of Moses pleading.
Yeah, absolutely. Moses was the intercessor. He stepped in.
Yeah, because then he was like, "You remember Abraham and Isaac and your faithful servants and stuff."
Yeah. So, if it wasn't for that, right? Of course, what's so ironic about this is, how could you've just come through the Red Sea. The sea has just parted for you. You've walked through, and the whole.
And this was
Egyptian
only
army,
like a month or two after Moses had gone up the hill, or gone up the mountain.
He was up there for 40 days.
Okay, yeah, so this is like a month and like a weekend.
So they're getting anxious because all of a sudden he's out of the picture. So I'm sure the chatter started. Of course, he was up there twice. But the chatter starts, and it's just so incredible how short, what short memories people have, and how the Lord has done miraculous things, and they just all of a sudden start chattering with one another and thinking, this isn't working for me or something, and how the enemy can, and it's just part of this spiritual warfare that we've been reading about in the book. How easily people can just, like you're saying, the heart is really not into following the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Their heart really isn't into it. It's just they're coming along for the ride, so to speak. And all of a sudden, when the opportunity presents itself, they're off on a tangent somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it also say about Aaron? I mean, here Aaron
just went along with it.
Aaron should have stepped forward.
Moses even brings it up to Aaron. He's like, you should have intervened.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why Aaron was not allowed into the promised land.
Yeah.
Along with Moses, because these guys were privileged. Moses, of course, was
face to face with God.
He was the epitome of
in fact, I think I might be wrong, because I was reading up on the stories late last night-ish, so that's why I'm getting details mixed up. But I think Moses, I think the Bible is saying that Moses was like the only, to this day, he was the only prophet to like live face by face, or like to live face to face with God, for the Israelites. Specifically, like he was the only prophet to actually be like spending a lot of time like face to face with God.
Yeah.
So like he had
I don't
this
know if he
huge.
was spending a lot of time, but God appeared to him, of course, in the burning bush.
Yeah.
And God was definitely making contact with him directly. And the people should have regarded that as something particular. But they eventually, and you got to remember, you know, here Moses comes back from Midian, and they don't know him. He's been gone for, 40 years. They don't know who he is. And yet here he's walking in saying, hey, I'm a spokesman for God. Okay, you give somebody the benefit of the doubt, but then there has to be some evidence of that. And God is giving them evidence all along the way.
Turns a stick into a snake.
And they're disregarding it, right? Yeah, all
The plagues,
like all this is
leprous
evidence that
hands,
that Moses is his
Getting
man.
water from a rock.
Moses and Aaron.
Well, that's later.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like this.
And
that's
even
just all it is.
Miriam to a certain extent. You know, it was the brothers and the sister there that they were the ones that God was working through.
I think it's also cool how it's a story about how it's also kind of an example that even though you can be like super faithful, you can still turn away. Like Moses and Aaron. Like Moses ended up getting mad, and that one mistake ended up costing him the same thing too. Aaron just
And it
went
was
along
because,
with it.
God wasn't.
But even
trying to
though
be-
like they were really faithful, you can still, like you still have to be vigilant because you can still not make it into the promised land.
Yeah, and it wasn't that God was trying to be overly cruel to them, because they did really. They were very instrumental in getting Israel to be reborn, in a sense, to get them out of Egypt. I mean, they were very instrumental in that as spokesman for God. And of course, God knew in His foreknowledge that those incidents were going to occur, and He used that to illustrate something very incredible. And God knew where the Jews were going to take their whole spiritual experience. He knew that they were going to get engrossed in the concept of the law was going to be the thing that, the keeping of the law was going to be the thing that would take them into the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
Well, He very directly illustrated that that was not the case by not allowing Moses, who was emblematic of the law. I mean, he had received the very law of God, okay? And so he was so associated with the law. If Moses had led the children of Israel into the promised land,
Wrote the written
what
law.
would have been reinforced, the idea that would have been reinforced, was that the law takes us into the promised land. And by not allowing Moses in, and Moses, there's a whole chapter in the Bible there where he is contending with the Lord. You know, why am I not going to be able to go in? You know, I mean, he is pleading his case. If anybody had a case to plead that should be allowed in, it should have been him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even though he made that mistake, he repented of that mistake. And of course, later, what happened to Moses?
He was resurrected?
He was resurrected, okay? So I mean,
That's even better.
That's even better, right? And of course, in God's plan, in God's omniscience,
He got the early package deal.
he got the special.
Early bird special.
But by not allowing Moses in, by not allowing Moses to take the children of Israel into the promised land, God illustrated something very incredible. Because who took his place?
Joshua.
Joshua.
Yeshua took his place, right? And so, who is it that takes us into the promised land? It is Yeshua. It's the works of righteousness by Yeshua that takes us into the promised land,
Joshua is like the
along
English version of
with
that, isn't it?
what were they carrying into the promised land with them? The law that God had written with His own hand. So it was the blood and the law together that took them into the promised land. God just arranges things like that to illustrate His truth. It was unfortunate in a sense that Moses was not allowed in, and that had to say something to the people there that, hey, look, you know, God is absolutely particular. But he utilized that by choosing Yeshua.
You know, the Jews consistently identified Moses with the law.
Right.
You know, when they talk about the
Moses'
scripture, they
written
refer
ordinance.
to the law and to the testimony. the law, meaning the 5 books written by Moses.
Correct.
They considered Moses kind of representing the law in its highest sense.
Exactly.
And so they were to carry the law on their hearts,
Right.
not worshiping the law.
Right. So God illustrates in this whole situation there with Moses that anybody that becomes a part of the kingdom of God will get there because of the blood and the law, the marriage of those two. That's why, Yeshua kept the law perfectly. All right. That's why when we believe that, when we accept that by faith, right, that gives us the ticket into the kingdom.
Scott said, yes, Moses spoke face to face with the Lord, Exodus 33:11, but yet even he disobeyed God at Kadesh in a fit of rage toward the rebellious people.
Yeah, he was human like everybody else, but Jesus was human like everybody else, and he kept the law perfectly, and it was his righteousness, his right doing, that we believe by faith, that really provides us the opportunity to be justified, for God to declare us just. Mm-hmm. We're sinners, and so we don't deserve to be allowed in. But when we accept Christ and his righteousness, that's accounted to us, and so that gives the Father the opportunity to declare us just, or justified, for a place in heaven. But it's just interesting how God worked it out. Joshua wasn't selected by happenstance. Joshua wasn't selected because he was maybe the most talented or the most proficient. Joshua was chosen because his name is Yeshua, and it was a representation of Christ and the blood that would lead them into the promised land, along with the law that they were still carrying.
I was about to say, but the law brought them to the entrance.
The law brought them to the entrance. Yeah.
The blood got them in.
Yeah. The law set them free from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
See, the law is a law of liberty. Sets you free from sin. Right? Because by keeping it, you're in the will of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the most interesting way, it was truly the law that struck the rock. The full force of the law. It was.
That provided the water of life.
Yeah. Yeah. How about that?
There's a lot of parallels between just everything.
Yeah, that has to be one of the most powerful parallels. I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than that, other than Christ's own death and resurrection. Like, here you have Moses hitting the rock, and then the water that provides life for everybody is there, and then after that event is when they're led to the promised land, is after the rock was struck.
There's so many illustrations to things that are like.
Which is another.
Really
you can take it even a step further, saying that it's because individuals have kept the law of God to their best of their ability, that has preserved this sinful world until the right time where God can step in. I mean, the Christians truly have preserved this planet, just like God's assessment here. If you go off in rebellion and worship the golden calf, I'm going to consume you. You've gone off the rail. It's the Christian presence in the world that, which is the heart of that attitude, is the law.
It's that spirit of intercession.
Yeah.
Which is what Moses was. He was an intercessor.
Yeah.
I mean, if all of the Christians were killed and there was nothing but wicked people left on the planet,
no intercession.
There'd be no intercession.
Yeah.
And we would end up destroying.
And no witness. So what's the sense of carrying anything any further if there's no witness of righteousness?
Right.
Yeah. Carry on, my friend. Number 9.
Well, back to the coveting.
Yeah, I was about to ask what this specific instance had to do with.
What this?
With coveting.
With this thing?
With the golden calf, yeah.
The children of Israel coveting another god, and what it led to because of their coveting. It ultimately led to Aaron not getting the promised land.
And ultimately led to 3,000 people.
How
That's the
long
next
had
thing
it
was reading
been?
30 to 35 and 32.
The golden calf incident happened
32.
how long after they were delivered from bondage in Egypt?
I don't know.
You say how long after they were out of bondage, or?
I mean, we're not talking about
within-
much time having passed from the time they left Egypt till they were at Sinai and Moses is getting the law.
Yeah, he's
Aren't we
coming
talking
in,
about something
he's
like
coming into the presence of God on the 50th
8 or
day.
10 weeks?
50th day.
Yeah.
So from the time they leave Egypt to the time that Moses is standing in the presence of God, or they're standing in the presence of God with the mountain on fire, is like the 50th day.
Okay, so 50 days from the time.
50 days.
So think about that.
Well, it takes him just about 2 months.
less than 7 weeks, just over 7 weeks.
Right.
They have had the pillar of fire leading them by night,
Parting the
Well,
keeping them
sea,
warm, the cloud by the day to keep them cool,
not only witnessing all
parted
the
the
plagues.
sea,
The
destroyed Pharaoh's army, provided
and
armaments, provided
water.
all kinds
Is this
of.
after manna?
provided water.
Is this after the manna?
This is before the manna.
Before manna?
I don't think.
No, manna's happened. Already happened.
Oh, that's right. The manna.
Yeah, because
I thought
manna's
it was-
happening
it's
on the
back
way
in-
too.
That was back in Exodus 16.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's had day after day after day,
Food,
7
water.
weeks
Their
of
clothes
physical,
didn't wear
yeah,
out, right?
but physical
Light.
evidence.
Heat?
They have
Right,
food
like-
provided. They had water from a rock. Miracle after
like-
miracle.
Water from a rock. I
And
like
then
that.
Moses is gone for a period of time, and they say, we need a God to worship. We need an idol.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sad, but that's where
Well,
the
the 40
mindset
days.
was.
The 40 days is occurring after, because God. That's when God calls them up
Right.
the first time, right? And then, of course, they have the whole experience where the mountain's on fire and so forth. So within 90 days, anyway, from leaving Egypt, 3 months. Within 3 months of them leaving Egypt, they're ready to pack it up, go home, and back to the flesh pots in Egypt.
But we also have to understand that they had spent their entire lifetime in captivity, surrounded by all of the trappings of paganism that existed in Egypt.
Took Moses 40 years to unlearn all of it.
Right. And so
Took them
how
40 years
patient
too.
God was with them in that circumstance, as well as understanding where they had come from.
But they're making the golden calf, right, after
All of those
after
evidence.
this mountain, after they've seen the mountain on fire,
After
God's
God
done
spoke to
to them, and they said, "Yeah, we're going to do everything you say.
Right.
We're on board." I mean, they made a confession that they were going to follow, and then Moses is gone for a couple of weeks.
Well, I mean,
they're-
you're talking about Moses being on top of this mountain that's on fire, and he's being gone for a couple of weeks. They think he's dead. Because, you know, like, there's no way you could survive being on fire for so long. But it's also like, they
I think
should
it's mostly
understand.
the fact that he was gone so long. It's like people understand that you fast that long and you're pretty much going to die.
Yeah.
Like that's a very long time to fast.
But they should have understood that God can preserve you no matter what, which... But I mean,
God set up this whole scene, right, with all the things that were just mentioned. You know, with the
and they still coveted
food
everything.
and the water.
And they even coveted
miracle
different food after God gave them
miracle
manna.
After miracle, I mean, so many blessings had come their way. I mean, I don't care what culture they grew up with. I don't care what things they were used to. Look what God did. He did all this to kind of wake up.
I think
what
the
might have
Bible said
happened-
thick-necked.
What might have happened had Aaron been a more
Aaron.
stronger backbone and said,
Should
look,
have said,
if he had rehearsed all of the evidences that they had along the way, that God was with them and God was leading, and encouraged them, instead of saying, okay, give me your earrings and we'll make a golden calf. You know?
yeah, he was just trying to pacify them.
Right. He did not have the backbone to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right.
I think when Moses was pleading for the Israelites, I think the expression he used was thick-necked for like the people.
Stiff-necked.
Stiff-necked. Stiff-necked.
Yeah, and thick neck too.
Yeah.
Thick skull.
Yeah.
Stiff neck and thick skull.
Stiff-necked numbskulls.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it said in verse 9 there. It is a stiff-necked people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hard-headed is he's hard-headed and stubborn.
Yeah.
They got their own way.
Really
of-
hard-headed.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost mind-boggling. It's like God chose the hardest culture to reach.
I mean, look.
And
He had 9 plagues, and of course the 10 plagues in Egypt. that was conditioning them, right, to make the move out of their comfort zone, which God knew everything that was going to be necessary. So he had them convinced that the thing to do was to leave. But in their hearts, it was like Sodom. It was like the whole Sodom experience again. Their hearts were back in Egypt, along the way. Even though they were going along for the ride, their
You
hearts
talking about
were
the
back
pillar
in,
of salt thing?
When Lot
Lot's wife, yeah.
heart was back
In the city.
Sodom.
And her heart was in the city?
But I'm saying God had broken them free from their indifference and their lethargy and their comfort zone. He broke them free from that during the plagues. And then then miracle after miracle along the way. And then for them to turn around and say, we want
Let's
to worship
a golden
calf because Moses is not around, and
provided the manna free of charge every day to meet their needs. And
Yeah.
all they could say was, we want the leeks and the onions and the garlic we had back in Egypt.
right. So
Yeah,
don't we do the same thing today? I mean, aren't we in the same place today? I mean, God provides miracle after miracle, provision after provision. And yeah, the end is coming soon, but we got this to do and that to do. I mean, it's easy for us. I mean,
Easy to get caught up in what you can see, and I guess it's easy to get caught up in the now.
I mean, look, we've got all this history in the Bible. We can look back and we can see how God has worked on behalf of others, especially His people. Those examples are for us. That's what the Bible says. They're for us to know that we serve a God who is able, and a God who is willing, and a God who is coming back soon. So, I mean, but yet, how indifferent we become, we take it for granted, right? A lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it also was to illustrate the absolute dependence Israel had to have on God. That literally their every need was coming from Him. Or, their every...
Yeah, because they're out in the wilderness. I mean, we're going to find ourselves out in the wilderness sooner than we think. Are we going to trust God, or are we going to just buck and kick and complain the whole way?
I want onions. I want leeks.
Now,
See, what had happened that really made the difference was Moses spending that 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. That changed him. That put him in a mindset of where he was learning to depend on God and learning to trust God,
right.
Whereas Aaron was still back in Egypt.
Yeah.
So Aaron didn't have that 40 years of learning to trust God the way Moses did. So that's why
unlearning
God
of
tapped
Egypt
Moses.
and learning to trust God.
Yeah, well, plus Moses also had the advantage of the priest, Jethro, or whatever his name was. Yeah. I mean, he had somebody to kind of mentor him and lead him in the direction of God as well. So, I mean, it wasn't just like out there just raising sheep. I'm sure he was learning a lot from Jethro. Because, I mean, Jethro was still teaching him stuff. He came out to him and he was like, what are you doing trying to lead all these people? Like, you're going to kill yourself. He's like, you need to start having people to delegate over other things. Like,
of course.
And so even then he was still teaching Moses stuff. But I think that...
But that also tells me that if we put ourselves in a position now, while things are relatively stable, to set ourselves apart from the world and cultivate that relationship with God, when things get crazy, especially as we get closer to the end, we will be in a better place to recognize and to trust Him. Those who come out at the very end who've never developed that relationship with Him are going to have a very difficult time trusting God with their future.
Have to seek discomfort.
Like the mixed multitude that came out with Israel, right?
Right.
You got to wonder how much they really were influencing.
They were
the Jews.
Constantly grumbling and complaining,
The Jews.
and probably influencing the Israelites to complain as well.
But they knew enough that they wanted to go with them.
Let's read 32, in Exodus 32. Read 30 to 35, because that'll help also talk about what happened to the people when they got
Exodus
slaughtered.
32.
Yeah, Exodus 32, 30 to 35.
It says, now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, you've committed a great sin. So now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. And then Moses returned to the Lord and said, oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book which you have written. And the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin. So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made.
You reading 35?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there were still repercussions, even though Moses interceded and God spared their lives. There were still repercussions because I obviously the attitude didn't change, even though they were spared. The attitude didn't change overnight when Moses finally came down. You know, obviously along the way to the Promised Land. In fact, none of them made it, except
Joshua, Caleb.
Joshua and Caleb.
And that says something about the end time ratio too. It's like very few by comparison with the world in general.
Which doesn't mean that all of those who didn't go through were lost.
Right.
It
Just means
meant
none of
they
them
did not get that ultimate privilege of being among those that crossed over.
Crossed over, right.
They crossed over a different way.
Yeah, they might, exactly. Yeah. But it's just interesting that God did spare Joshua and Caleb because of their faithfulness. And so had the other people, if there had been other people that were faithful, and maybe there were, but they were just laid to rest,
Getting old
or whatever. You know, 40 years, long time to be plucking around in the desert.
Especially if you're already
Trekking
kind of
around.
older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Scott says Joshua, a type of Christ, was chosen to lead the people into the Promised Land because of his faith in God as one of the spies sent into the land, and Caleb too.
That's right. They're the two witnesses that came back with the faithful report. And see, that's a parallel to the two witnesses that God's provided, the law and the blood.
I think we were talking about that last week.
Yeah.
But say more than that as well as it's kind of interesting too that even though they are the only two from the original crowd that got to go into the to the Promised Land, the two that were left, yeah.
Right.
That even they also had to wait for that initial 40 years because of the rest of the multitude. You know.
Oh, sure.
So like in a way.
They prevailed.
Yeah.
They persevered to the end.
Cool. Well, then we'll end it with this last one, Matthew 6:21.
It's hard to believe that there are people in the world who think the Old Testament is irrelevant.
What a treasure they're missing.
Yeah, like
They're missing the whole foundation.
they're missing the whole book. What would you say?
Actually,
What's
6:20 and 21 would be appropriate.
Sure, you can do both.
6:20.
Let's go back to 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, the work of the gospel is truly a work on the heart. It's not a work on just the actions. The actions follow the work on the heart.
That's why the 10th Commandment is the heart commandment.
Yeah.
But it's
Philippians
also an
2.
illustration that all of the commandments are heart commandments.
Yeah. Well, they're more like actions.
Right.
This one's the only one that prohibits.
But they
A
are
thought.
actions that are outgrowths of heart attitudes.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the only commandment that says. This is the only commandment that prohibits a thought. Everything else prohibits an action. Stealing, lying, killing. This one says do not think about stealing your friend's
But isn't
things.
that an indication that at the heart of all of it?
That's
is
why
your
it's the heart commandment.
Yeah, but I'm saying, isn't that for
at the
the
heart
Jewish
of all of them,
mind,
yeah.
looking at this, you would get down and say, well, I can do that, I can do that, I can do
Yeah.
that. But you get down to that last one and you think,
That's desire.
and there's an outward action for all of the other ones.
Well, I mean,
And you could see if that was happening, but how would you know if someone's coveting what someone else has? That's an inward desire that
Right.
It's the commandment that tells you to check yourself.
Yeah.
To keep yourself in check. That's why I was saying if you can keep the 10th commandment, everything else should pretty much fall in line. Because I mean, think about like even like for the 5th commandment, if you start coveting other things, you bring dishonor to your parents because now you are acting upon that coveting. So you're not honoring your father and mother because now you're not a person that your father and mother can be proud of.
And David coveting Bathsheba was not honoring the commandment about being faithful to your spouse and not.
Yeah, he's committing adultery, and not only that, turned him into a murderer
And a thief.
and a thief.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this commandment is the one that really gets them all. But that's also why continually through the Bible it says, "Bind up the commandments in your heart," because it is about your heart. It's all about what you're like.
And God says, "I'll write my commandments on your heart." So
Yeah.
I'll take out your heart of stone and put it in a heart of flesh. And
But so yeah, but I mean, it's pretty awesome too to think that if you can just think about keeping one of them, you can keep all of them.
but keeping that one is a challenge, especially in our materialistic world.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we've got an entire industry of advertising designed
Signs.
to create an inordinate desire for
Desire.
something you don't have.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about like coveting other people's time.
Well, we call it keeping up with the Joneses, right?
That's part of it.
Yeah, like
I
coveting
mean,
other.
that's the real goal of advertising, is to create desire.
Exactly.
That's what motivates a person to want to purchase, to go to the next step.
But,
I mean, I
it
think-
is a spirit of selfishness.
I think that's a little bit different though, because that's like, because like marketing is like you look at something on marketing and you don't go, I want to steal that necessarily. You look at that and go, oh, I want to save up and buy that. So it's not. I mean, that is like still storing up treasure in your heart if you're materialistic. But it's like you look at a product like your weed eater just broke. You see a new one online. You're like, oh, that looks really nice. I guess I'm gonna go buy that. So it's not like marketing is coveting. It's when you see somebody else with something nice and you're like,
Right.
that,
but
I want it and
in
I want
this-
it now.
In this culture here, see, we can go online and see what everybody else has, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we're being told what everybody else has through marketing, right? But back here in the day, they could just look across the fence. That's all they really had, and see what other people had.
You guys got a nice
Yeah.
house.
Well, I mean,
Nice
you also
Well,
think about how it was back then. People had to build everything themselves, and really had to be industrial. So if somebody was really crafty with their hands and you were not, you could definitely tell, I want that person's house because that house looks really nice, way better than mine.
Yeah.
So it's like everything was like custom.
But is
almost.
it more or less appropriate if you look across the fence and you see what somebody else has, and then you say, "Oh, I'm going to go get me one of those," and you go out and you actually buy it, and like
You work for it.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like Elijah said, it's keeping up with the Joneses. I mean, to me, that seems almost just as inappropriate. I've got to have something because this other person has it, or I've got to have something better.
Well, yeah, that
than this
really
other
falls
person.
under where your heart is.
Yeah. So,
Are you desiring it because you want to be the same as them, or because you just want to have
yeah.
something nice for your family, or
You know,
something, or
Paul
because you
is-
want to make?
Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, he I think he said it best. He said, let this mind be in you, which was in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
And then in verse 13 of the second chapter, it says, for it is God that worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So,
Yeah, I mean, Jesus was like a nomad. He didn't really have anywhere to settle down. He just
but his perspective was others first.
yeah.
Not what can I
Others
take from
first.
my neighbor, or not what can I go get from myself because my neighbor has one, but how can I help my neighbor? How can I encourage
Well, yeah, so
my neighbor?
if you stop coveting your neighbor, you would love your neighbor
You would
as
love-
yourself.
Yeah,
It's
so,
the exact same thing. If you keep the 10th commandment, you can keep all of them.
Yeah.
If you can keep that one.
yeah, good study, Sue.
Scott posted, as it was 40 years before the people were allowed to enter the promised land, it will be 40 jubilees before all the people will enter his rest since Jesus was crucified.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Good
Yeah.
point, Scott.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Got our
That's the 2,000 years. Yeah.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Good study. All right, I think we're out of time. And did you pretty much get through everything you wanted to touch on?
Mm-hmm. That's everything. I
Okay.
mean, the commandment is pretty straightforward and just talking about how to deal with your heart. So, I mean, it's not like... I mean, it's really massive study to do, but I think everybody understands, which is the main thing I'm trying to get at, is just everybody understands what the 10th commandment is.
Sure. That's a key.
It's almost like a summary. It's like,
That's
if you can
key.
keep all these things together, just like if you do not covet, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, the first,
Because it really deals with your heart.
You know, that spirit of
Yeah.
covetousness is an inordinate desire or an inappropriate desire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's nothing wrong with
Wanting a new car.
wanting a better car that runs better than what you have. But if you
when
want,
you decide to go get your neighbors, then it comes in.
or get your neighbors, or that you have to have a Rolls Royce
It's a problem when
instead
you
of
say I want a
driving
better wife.
something more
That's what I was
more
just-
practical.
I was just telling you.
That inordinate
Upgrade your wife.
desire, that desire to show off, to please, you know,
Right.
Yeah,
get
that's
somebody else to
Self
look at you.
becomes the priority.
It is.
yeah.
it
That's
is
why
a
I was saying
selfish
earlier. It
thing.
really depends on the motivation. If your only motivation to buy a new car is that you want to impress your neighbor, not a good motivation.
Yeah, exactly. So I understand that you want to start a series next week on marriage
Health?
and the family.
No, I said he had mentioned wanting to start a series on marriage and the family.
Uh-oh.
I didn't
Elijah's
say I
in
wanted
the
to do
middle.
it next week. I wanted to ask him
Oh,
if he
okay.
wanted to.
Oh, cool. I was about to say, all right. I don't remember this conversation, but
You had talked about it a while back, and I just said because you were going to be gone over the summer,
yeah.
we ought to see if you were interested in doing that now before the summer started.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I'll be back on
Weekends.
weekends.
Will
Maybe,
you?
maybe not every weekend. It just depends.
We
I'll
just
try.
wanted to offer that if that was something you were interested in doing now.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything in the commandments that we feel need to be studied again, or
The
Well,
Reedies,
Again, the law is such a major topic.
the Reedies say it's the method of getting what you want that makes all the difference.
Yeah.
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 There's nothing wrong with having or getting nice things or
Yeah.
things that other people also have. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a matter of the motivation, because I could see where, you know, like you said, it goes specific enough that it's like, don't covet your neighbor's house, his wife, his people, his stuff.
his animals, anything?
Yeah, you know, it's
Don't
the
covet
idea.
your neighbor is really where you could
But I
summarize
think
it.
mostly what it's
So too.
inferring is like the covet to the point of I will have what is theirs, as opposed to like
I want that someday.
I want something that they have too. Like, you know,
Well, yeah, it's like
because
you
it's not bad to want good things. I don't think.
think of like parents, or think of like two people who just got married and they see a kid walk by and they go, "I want kids someday." Is that coveting? And that wouldn't be
You know.
Unless you're like, I
But
want
if I'm
that
going to
kid.
kidnap
I want
that
that
one and
kid.
take that one for my own, that's a different
that's
method.
covet napping.
But you run into even with that thinking, Elijah. I think you go into the vein of materialism, and you begin to lose a sense of urgency and focus on where we are in time and what's most important. Is it having something, or is it? I mean, because
Around here.
Psalm 50 and verse 5 says, "Gather my saints together, those that have made a covenant with me through sacrifice." And those 6 verses in Psalm 50 are talking about the very last days of Earth's history. And so God's people are going to be called to sacrifice, they're not going to have a life of leisure comfort like maybe other people in the world. It's going to be involving a lot of sacrifice, because God's going to be cutting them loose from a lot of the things that entangle us, and material things entangle us. I'm just looking at the
Yeah, but I mean,
perspective.
you also got to look at it from the side too. It's like you own a house, you own all of these things. You know, it's like, is that the point where you're materialistic now?
Well, it could be. I mean, it could certainly progress to that place.
Yeah, but your focus
let
isn't
it.
on the stuff. Your
If you let
focus
it.
is on just providing something safe for your family. Your focus is on other people. But I mean, it's not bad to have a kitchen where you can cook stuff readily instead of having to make a fire pit and have
Right,
to use a
because
stick
our-
to make the fire.
Because our perspective
Don't wanna be
is that one
materialistic.
day
Yeah.
God's providing these
Gotta use
things.
sticks to be minimalistic.
God's providing these things because one day we'll be able to use them to
Exactly.
assist others in coming out
It's
of.
it's really
city
the
areas,
focus.
and
It's really the focus of your heart.
It really becomes that.
Check your heart at the door.
Pray us away.
Pray away. Okay. Lord, we thank you so much for the Sabbath and for this study. Thank you for helping Simeon to guide discussion, and for you to open up so many interesting insights today to us. Help us to really absorb them and take them in. And just as we've done so with the spiritual food, bless the physical food to do the same for our bodies, and to empower us to further accomplish your will. We thank you so much for the blessing of the Sabbath and this day of rest that you've given us. We ask for a blessing for those that were tuning in as well, that they would also receive the same blessing you have offered all who keep the Sabbath. And that you would watch over us for the rest of the day and be with those on our prayer list as well. This we ask and pray in the name of your Son.
Amen. Amen. All right, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope that you've been blessed and hope that you have a great week to come and that you'll be back with us again next week. We're not sure exactly what we're going to jump into, but it'll be something scriptural for sure. And we'll see you then. So have a great week, everyone.